Hello again. We're in Christianity and the Social Crisis by Walter Rauschenbusch, page 130. Rauschenbusch has been discussing the impressive Christian charity of those early centuries. He goes on, by the end of the 3rd century, charity began to be institutionalized. There were Christian lodging houses for strangers, homes for the aged, the sick, and the poor. In the 1st and 2nd century, it was more a matter of direct neighborly help from man to man. Probably the chief help was not given in the form of money, but of human service and influence. In Paul's epistles, we get glimpses of influential families in whose homes the church groups met and upon whom the task of hospitality and watch care chiefly devolved. They put their property, their influence, and social standing at the service of the Christian community. Paul speaks of such with deep respect. Stephanus, who came from Corinth to visit Paul at Ephesus, was a man of that kind. He probably made this journey on behalf of the church at his own expense, just as men of wealth would undertake to defray some public function at Athens, or paid for common expenses in the voluntary associations of Greek social life. The poor and the alien were without political rights or social importance, and found protection by close relation to some citizen of wealth and standing. The relation of client and patron was widespread and of great social importance. It is interesting that where our conditions are similar to those of the ancient world, a similar relation of clientage has grown up in the protection given to the poor by the political boss and the service exacted by him in return. It is probable that the wealthier members of the Christian communities served as the patrons of their poorer brethren. Phoebe, of the Corinthian harbor town of Cenchrea, was probably not a poor deaconess, but a woman of social standing who had served Paul and many others as patrona. Christianity spread at first chiefly in the cities and among the lower middle class, the working class, and the slaves. The poorer classes of the empire were a proletariat much like that of our great cities. They were largely composed of slaves and of free men who were economically submerged through the competition of organized slave labor, through the drift of the peasantry toward the cities, and through the increasing economic breakdown of the empire. The Christian church was of immense social value to these people. It took the place in their life which life insurance, sick benefits, accident insurance, friendly societies, and some features of trades unions take today. The individual found in the community a hold when any wave of misfortune threatened to sweep him off his feet and drag him out to sea in the undertow of misery. It is now generally recognized that this element of mutual help was quite as strong a factor in the growth of the Christian movement as the attractiveness of the truth it presented. Harnack justly makes the gospel of love and charity one of the chief chapters in his account of the missionary expansion during the first 3 centuries. The historian Schiller, in his History of the Imperial Age of Rome, says, quote, "As the gospel of the poor and oppressed, of the despairing and guilty, Christianity naturally sought its adherents first in the lower strata of population. And if we remember what moral degradation prevailed in the Greek seaports, we realize the more the power of the new faith, which was able to awaken a higher and somewhat more ideal conception of life even amid such surroundings. The fundamental idea of Christianity could unfold but slowly, and only a few of the nobler spirits could rise to such lofty conceptions. With the majority of believers, the determining motives were the socialist elements on the one hand, and the messianic hope and the expectation of a better life beyond on the other hand." And that's the end of the quote from Schiller. Karl Kautsky, in his History of Socialism, thinks the practical aid was a stronger element than the hope of the Golden Age. He says, quote, "Like the social democracy today, primitive Christianity grew to a power irresistible by the ruling classes of that day because it became indispensable to the masses of the population." End of the quote. Speaking of the decay of communistic enthusiasm in the church after Constantine, he says, "But even in this weakened form, Christianity for centuries accomplished great things in counteracting pauperism. Though it did not abolish poverty, it was the most effective organization for alleviating the misery growing out of the general poverty within its reach. And that was perhaps the strongest lever which lifted it to success. I'll link to the video we did on Northrop Frye's evaluation of why Christianity conquered Roman paganism.